the simplest form of breathing that you can do that helps to reverse what we call high emotions, so stress, anger, those sorts of things, is something called 4-4-6 breathing. So in other words, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, and breathing out for 6. And it's really useful, particularly when we're in a conversation and maybe we're quite rattled by what's being said.
Welcome back to Neuroconversing Leadership, where we talk about effective communication and leadership, especially in the STEM workplace. I'm Jeremy Doran, and I help great engineers become great leaders. Today, we have a special guest, Richard Reid. Richard is a former psychotherapist with the Witness Protection Program. He was a chief people officer for a global law firm, and he's published 2 books, one about charisma and one about phobias. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great to be here.
Those are an interesting combination of book topics. How did it come about that you wrote about those 2 things?
You notice, yeah, they're quite separate areas of study in a way, aren't they? But I guess everything I do is really, it's about psychology, and it's about helping people to achieve their full potential, really. So whether that's overcoming a phobia so they can live a full life, whether it's working with severe trauma, or whether it's working with charisma, which is really about potentially high-achieving people wanting to have even more impact.
For the phobia, can you explain what the difference between a fear and a phobia is?
Yeah, so I guess the main difference between a phobia and a fear is the level of rational thinking behind it. So if you see a shark in the water, there's every reason why you would feel fear, because there's an obvious danger there. With a phobia, that fear can be attached to anything and everything. So it could be a colour, it could be rubber, it could be a button. And people get very frustrated with themselves because they can't understand themselves why they're frightened of those things. And they build a whole life plan around trying to avoid those situations. So it can be extremely debilitating for people.
That sounds it. And for a probably more fun topic for me, tell us more about charisma and what does charisma actually mean?
Okay, so it's an interesting topic, charisma, because it means different things to different people. But for me, it's really about how you channel your inner resources to be the best version of yourself. And it's not about everybody being the same. It's about recognizing and having confidence in your uniqueness and being able to manage your internal emotions to be flexible in terms of how you deal with people. And a lot of the time, we're so consumed by our own emotions and the things that we need to achieve that actually we don't have enough spare capacity to recognize what other people have going on and what they might need from us. When we can recognize that, we can bring different aspects of ourselves to bear in an authentic way that helps us and helps them.
Great. So what are some things that I can do to try to get more charismatic?
Okay. Well, I think first of all, it starts with managing your internal world. So recognizing what you're feeling and having some strategies for being able to manage those emotions, or at the least be aware of them so you can mitigate against them if they're not helpful to the situation you're going into. So that's the first thing. Without that, you can have all the skills in the world, but you're not going to know when and where to use them. So that's the first thing. And a lot of people struggle with that. And a lot of people that I've worked with are business leaders, business professionals, and they say, well, I haven't got time to do an hour's mindfulness every day. I'm busy. It's just going to feel like another thing to have to do. So we talk about transitions. When you're transitioning between activities, how even if you've only got 30 seconds between Zoom calls, for instance, how you can tap into what's happening for you and do very simple things that can make a massive difference to how you then manifest in the next situation. And some of these things are so obvious, we just don't think about them. So, for example, breathing. You know, we all breathe, and if we don't, we've got a serious problem. But often our breathing is reflective of what we're feeling and feeds back into how we're feeling. And even just recognizing that and slowing our breathing down allows our brain to shift into what we call system 2 of the brain rather than system 1. And system 2 is where we are emotionally intelligent. It's where we are collaborating with other people. It's where we're recognizing more what's going on for other people. So slowing your breathing down is one thing that you can start to do. Another simple thing that you can do is to set an intention. Set an intention for that interaction. A lot of the time, we're so focused upon the outcome or what it is that we want to say, but we don't think about the emotion we want to generate. And it's the emotion that captures people's attention. You can have the most cogent argument in the world, but if people don't tap into it on an emotional level, it's only going to get so far. So I encourage people to think about what's the emotion that is going to bring the best out of this situation for me, for my message, and for the other person. And when we start to think about that, we can start to gravitate and align our body language, our voice, and the way that we structure the message to bring that out more effectively.
It's so interesting because that is not at all what I would have thought of as what's important to charisma. You think of charisma and you think about kind of the presentation style of a person and the way what they're putting out, but you're saying it has even more to do with being aware enough of yourself that you can interact emotionally intelligently. Is that right?
Absolutely. So for me, one of the things that's often portrayed as charisma, for me, it really isn't charisma. So it's not about, look at me, I'm wonderful. And it's not necessarily about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being true to yourself and that authenticity, bringing out the best of the people. People respond to authenticity. So it's not necessarily about being polished, albeit I do teach people skills to improve their presentation and their communication. It's about having the confidence to be who you are. And a lot of the time, we don't. We hide bits of ourselves away because we think they're not acceptable. Or we think, if I'm going to be charismatic, I'm going to be the loudest person in the room, but I'm an introvert. And introverts often suffer by comparison. They compare themselves and think, well, I can't be charismatic. That's not me. But actually, they bring other things to the table that actually, when they're used in a purposeful way, can also go a very, very long way. And obviously, extroverts are the classic example of charisma, but some extroverts crowd other people out. They'll talk and talk and talk, and actually, the other people close down. They might think, wow, you're wonderful, but actually, I don't feel like you've met me, or you've recognized me, or that you're interested in me. And I think that's fundamental to this.
When you talk about breathing, are there any particular exercises that you have that people can do?
Yeah. So the simplest form of breathing that you can do that helps to reverse what we call high emotions, so stress, anger, those sorts of things, is something called 4-4-6 breathing. So in other words, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, and breathing out for 6. And it's really useful, particularly when we're in a conversation and maybe we're quite rattled by what's being said, and it's tempting to dive in and say something. It's a great way of slowing ourselves down and buying time to not only manage our emotions, but reflect on how we want to position our counter argument. And often if we hold back, we can start to use the language and the ideas of somebody else. We can come across as being respectful and have more leverage for understanding and collaboration. But so often we dive in. We hear something we don't like, we don't agree with it, and we dive in. And that's system one, and that's what we're trying to manage.
It's so interesting. I've read a few different places about meditation techniques that have a 4-6-7. And
Okay.
there's something about that apparently allows you to kind of like get your automatic and, I can't remember the name of the other system, kind of in sync.
Parasympathetic nervous system, yeah.
One other thing that I, for myself, will often do is I will make sure that I relax my stomach because we all tend to like clench in our stomachs, and I'll try to tuck my hips because it's just such a more grounded position, and both things seem to help for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You should mention that because there are lots of techniques that I use with people that are along those sorts of lines. And again, one of the things that we often do when we're agitated, so say we come from a meeting and it's been very difficult, and now we've got to change tack in the next meeting, we lose connection with, as silly as it sounds, we lose connection with the extremities of our body. So we go into that fight or flight mode to some degree. And when we're in that fight or flight mode, it's all about recognizing what's happening from the waist upwards. Because imagine you're in a life or death situation. That's the part of the body you need to protect most. So you're very aware of what's happening there, and less so what's happening in the arms and the legs. So even things like noticing your feet connecting with the floor, or even just turning your head to one side and just scanning the room, reverse some of those effects. And again, as you said, it starts to activate that parasympathetic nervous system that tells the brain, it's okay, you can calm down, it's all over, relax. And then we've got more flexibility as to how we want to be in the next situation.
I like that. And on similar topic, I know that you know a lot about body language. And one thing that I've heard people say is sometimes it's not the obvious things that you look for, but it are the extremities like your feet and things that
Absolutely.
reveal a lot. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely, and it really sort of plays into to what I was just saying a moment ago. That actually we tend to be more conscious of what's happening in the upper half of the body, and less so in the lower half. So I've done exercise with a room of 50 or 70 people, and you can look around the room. People are trying to work on their body language, and you can see their feet. Their feet are revealing their true emotions. People pull their feet in when they're talking about something uncomfortable. They often go into childlike poses when they're feeling vulnerable. So they swing their feet, or feet turn away
Yeah.
when actually we want to end the conversation. Think about when we meet people in the streets or the corridor. Somehow we know when the conversation's coming to an end, and sometimes it's because the body starts to turn away. So there's things like that that tend to be outside of people's awareness, and so part of the work that I do with people around charisma is not saying it's wrong that you've got these quirks, but making people more aware of them so you can make choices about if and what you want to do with them.
I've been to networking meetings before, and if I meet someone who says that they're either like a fashion consultant, a body language expert, or a psychologist, it makes me very self-conscious about what I'm doing over the next couple of minutes.
It's so true. So when I go to parties and people ask me that, I just say I'm a painter and decorator. It just solves all the problems. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, because you've got basically all the things that make someone nervous.
exactly. And if I write anything down, people start to panic. Yeah,
That's good if you want to mess with someone.
exactly.
So, what so many of our meetings, like this one, are done remotely, and you lose a lot of the body to
Yes.
be able to communicate with and understand from. What are some things that people can do when they're on Zoom or any of the other remote platforms to understand and deliver good body language?
Okay, well, I guess the first thing is eliminate as many distractions as you can. People tend to move around a lot and fidget when they're on camera. So trying to eliminate those things is really useful in terms of setting your neutral stance and putting other people at ease. And beyond that, there's a few other things we can do. So quite often, even if people can't see your hands when you're on a Zoom call, for instance, or a Teams call, using your hands is a great way of setting your own tempo. And
Oh,
so you can see my hands right now, but even if you couldn't, it's useful in terms of setting my tempo. So imagine a helium balloon. So imagine a kid's party with a kind of helium balloon that if you let it go, it rises up to the ceiling. And the helium balloon is the energy in the situation. And what I say to people is imagine the energy, again, setting the intention, the energy that you want to bring to the situation. If you want high energy, you want that balloon to rise. If you want lower energy, in other words, putting people at ease, calming people down, then you want the balloon to go down. So, very simple thing you can do, whether people can see you or can't see you, is to think about how you position your hands. If you want high energy, ordinarily you'll bring your hands wider apart, softer fingers, and it might be bigger movements. So this is really exciting, guys. You really need to think about this. Yeah. If I want to calm the situation down, or more importantly, calm myself down, straighter fingers, hands close together, and pushing down. So it's okay. We've got this under control. And doing that helps to regulate our voice, regulate our emotion. So that's the first thing that you can do. The other big thing that you can do is start to think about making your sentences and your words work more for you. And a lot of the time, we're quite lazy. We use the content of what we say to do the work for us. And yes, absolutely, that's important in terms of giving substance. But if we want to captivate people, we need to think about how we position that content. And one of the things you'll often see, and if you look at any of the sort of classic orators, so people like Barack Obama, they tend to use shorter sentences. And they use shorter sentences for a number of reasons. Number one, it's easier to regulate your emotions. So if your emotions or your thoughts are running ahead of you, using shorter sentences is a way to rein things in a bit and recalibrate. That's the first thing. It also means if you're making key points, there's always a time lag. Shorter sentences allow you opportunities to pause, to engage with your audience, check that they're understanding what you're saying in a way that you might not otherwise pick up on unless you're in a room with them. And with those shorter sentences, what you can also start to do is to use those sentences more deliberately. It takes practice, but you can start to think about, why am I using the words that I'm using in this sentence? Do these bring out a particular point? Or do I need to use different words, more dynamic words? Do I need to change the emphasis of my voice or the use of my hands, for instance, to bring out a key point? So it's almost like this is the bit you need to listen to. And we all know when you're on Teams calls, Zoom calls, they're far more tiring than when you're in the room with somebody. So inevitably, people's energy and concentration starts to wane. So you've actually got to work much harder at this, particularly if it's a lengthy call, to keep people engaged. The words won't do all the work for you. So this is why body language, use of voice, pauses in appropriate places are really good in terms of creating what we call pattern interrupts. So pattern interrupts are when you wake people up. People start to get into a familiar pattern. So you've been talking for a while, they'll think they know where it's heading, you'll have a regular tone. And then if you suddenly change it, people wake up again. What was that? What is it about that that's significant that I need to listen to? So it's really useful for re-engaging people's brains, because people often go into autopilot, even with the best of intentions. So those are a few very basic things that you can do that really bring alive what you might have to say.
I see some people are quite good at using questions to re-engage people. I've seen people do it too much, where I'm like, stop asking me to put one or two in the chat.
Yeah.
But if done appropriately, it absolutely brings me back, and then I'm sure I pay better attention just after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you mention somebody by name when you ask the question, if there's a group of people, that switches people on. But often those open-ended questions are really good, not just in this sort of environment, but any kind of environment. When we're asking open-ended questions, it's a great opportunity to not just find out facts from people, but also find out what things mean to them. So what was that like? So when that happened, tell me more about that. How was that? So we're moving away from facts into deeper conversations. And for most people, they don't tend to have that very often. And they're socialized to giving the abridged answer when somebody asks them a question. So if we start to do some of this, whether it's on a Teams call or in a networking event, people start to remember that. People engage with us in a different way. We're more memorable for them. They're more memorable for us. And they come away with a feel-good factor about us, which means they're going to be better inclined towards us, if other opportunities arise in the future, or if our name comes up in conversation as a form of promotion for us.
It's interesting. I go to networking meetings, and very often you're told to meet as many people as you can and get as many cards as you can. And I found that just wears me out. But I'm happy to talk to a small handful of people and just go a lot deeper. And I'm not always sure if it was as productive as if I'd met all those other people, but it sure was more entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there myself, and you come away with a whole load of cards. You think, well, who was that? Who does that card relate to? And a week goes by, and then you definitely don't remember who that person was. So engaging with people on an emotional level is really, really powerful. And obviously it needs to be a two-way process. We can't just ask questions. We also need to show a little bit of vulnerability ourselves in order for people to feel safe to divulge. So absolutely, that's a great technique to apply. The other thing to think about is, again, pauses. So when somebody says something, how often do we immediately dive in and give a response? And often it's coming from a position of enthusiasm. But sometimes what we do is we hijack the conversation. We take it a direction that isn't important to the other person. Or actually, we're asking people questions in ways that they haven't thought about before. So if we take them at their first response, that may not be the fully formulated response. Sometimes allowing people a moment just to reflect on what they've said, to qualify that, or at least hear it themselves, can be tremendously profound for people. People say things all the time, but they don't hear what they've said. So sometimes doing that or bringing it to people's attention, wow, you seem really excited when you're talking about that, is a great way of getting them to connect with more of the emotion. And again, as we've said before, emotions are a really great way of engaging people and making us and our interactions with people more memorable.
One thing that I will often do when I'm trying to get to that next level, because people will give you the surface, I found that asking a specific question can kind of hijack their thought. I don't even ask a question. I will often just say, "Oh, really?" And then I'll be quiet.
Yeah.
And then they will start talking about the why that thing was so important to them. So
Yeah.
showing interest and not asking a specific question, but doing what you can to make them talk more gets what's important.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a great idea, and I think also reflecting back what you've heard. So you're telling me
Hmm.
you did this. It's encouragement that says it's okay. Go a bit more, because most people aren't used to that, and so it as I say, it makes us more memorable, and then people want to know more about us. People are interested in people that are interested in them. I'd much rather have a few quality conversations at a networking event than collect 20 cards.
Yeah. Like you said, the number of times I've come home with a bunch of cards the next morning, I look, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Exactly, exactly. And what's even better for me is that some of these people you will see them again at some point. And actually, if you've had a quality conversation with them, if you remember something about them, again, that is different to most people's interactions. Well, you remember that we spoke about that. So having a good memory can be great, or making a note of who you've spoken to, some key things you remembered is great if you're going into an environment where you like to see them again. And again, that makes people feel seen and heard. And that's massive. That's a big part of charisma, making people feel seen and heard. I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you.
And even in corporations everywhere, the the lack of people feeling like they are seen and heard is devastating to productivity and morale and everything else. So that's a great one to
Fully
use
agree.
everywhere. So I've asked you a bunch of questions, but let me ask you, are there any topics that you like to talk about but rarely get to that you'd like to share with us here?
I guess for me, the idea of psychological safety, again, this taps in broadly with some of the topics we spoke about. But I think psychological safety is massive. It's massive in one-on-one interactions, but I think even more so within organisations. When people don't feel they've got that psychological safety, number one, they don't engage as much. We need to make people feel safe to be able to suggest ideas, to be able to speak up when they're having problems. Um, because otherwise problems become bigger problems. And it's no coincidence that organisations that register high in terms of psychological safety tend to have less workplace accidents, less serious white collar crime, whistleblowing,
Hmm.
all these kinds of things tend to be a more comfortable part of the social fabric there. But also, they're ahead of the competition in terms of their ideas because people are constantly coming up with ideas. It doesn't matter about seniority. Nobody has the monopoly on good ideas. So actually, having an environment where you've got leaders who show vulnerability, don't know all the answers, who talk about problems they've worked through or are working through, or defer to other people before they speak, makes a massive difference.
Yeah, some of the best leaders that I've known were the ones who are the most willing to say, "Oh, I don't know," and then just ask other people.
Yeah.
It makes them look so much smarter and stronger to be willing to just say that.
Absolutely, humility. It's humility. So, if you say that every time, then I might start to worry. But now and again, said I don't know, Bob. This is your expertise. What do you think? Gives people such a elevates people, and when you don't do that, people stop contributing, and you start to create an echo chamber. And even the most capable leaders in the world, if they haven't got people pushing back or generating alternative viewpoints, they they become exaggerated forms of who they are. So everybody needs to be learning. Leaders need to be taking people with them. So it's a massive
Yeah.
area for me. And I think I come from a mental health background, and I've worked with so many organisations, and they've got all the mental health provision in the world, but people don't avail themselves of it because actually there's an unspoken view of people who use those services because actually people further up the chain don't show vulnerability. Or,
Mhm.
they're sending emails at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they're telling everybody else to go home at 5. You've got to walk the walk. It has to start at the top and cascade down. But so many organisations get that wrong, and it turns into a tick box exercise.
Yep. Very good. All right, Richard. Unfortunately, we need to start wrapping up. So before I ask you my three questions, can you tell us more about how people can reach out to you and what's a good way to connect?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Richard-Reid, spelled R-E-I-D, or you can go to my website, which is www.richard-reid.com.
Perfect. I will put those in the show notes as well so people can just find you that much easier. Now, for my 3 questions, what is a place you have traveled to and loved, and a place you have not yet been but want to go?
Okay, a place that I've traveled to and loved. I guess it would have to be where I am now, South Africa. So for some reason, been fascinated by South Africa since I was a child in the UK. And actually part of my transition to be a therapist, I took a year out from work to travel, and one of the places I went to was South Africa. And absolutely loved it. It was everything I hoped it would be. And then about 3 years ago, I decided to move to South Africa. So I now spend quite a bit of my year in Cape Town and sort of alternate that with the UK, and absolutely love it. The way of life, the weather, the people, it's fantastic. So no looking back on that front. And then a country I want to go to, I'd love to go to Japan, because it seems so varied, so many islands, so many different cultures, and so very, very different to anywhere else that I've come across. So that would be a big one for me. So that's on the agenda at some point. I think the culture, the food is fantastic, and I'm fascinated by the etiquette, the social etiquette.
Well, if you go there and you really like it, maybe you'll move there next.
Who knows? Maybe.
And next question is, who do you think is a great communicator and why?
Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of people out there who are really good at this stuff, but one of the ones that I find fantastic is actually Oprah Winfrey, and I don't think she's necessarily polished in terms of her communication, but going back to some of the things we've spoken about today, very warm, very humble, appears genuinely interested in people, and only really talks about herself when it's relevant to the topic. So it's all about making people feel seen and heard. And I think that idea of being present and being warm is it's a powerful combination that a lot of people could learn from. And she's very comfortable about talking about her back history as well. Talks about all the things that she's grappled with. And I think that helps to sort of level the floor, doesn't it? And encourage other people to open up about themselves too. So I think that's important.
And she seems to have done all right for herself. And then the final question is, what is one piece of communication advice that we can all benefit from?
I would encourage everybody to experiment more with silence. Most people are incredibly uncomfortable with silence, but maybe try it out with a friend or a loved one, and just once or twice in the space of a 5-minute conversation, see what it's like to just hold back for a fraction longer than you ordinarily would do, and just experiment and just see. Maybe you'll learn something new, or look at somebody in a slightly different way when you do that. There's always too much noise in the world, so try a little bit of silence.
I love that. I tried to do that already, but I know that I can do more. So thank you for that. Richard, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to Neuroconversant Leadership. If you found this beneficial, can you do me one small favor? It'll be quick, I promise. Can you go and give this podcast a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen before doing anything else? Unless you're driving. If you're driving, then I need you to keep driving. And then when you're done and parked, then go ahead and give me a review. Hopefully 5 stars, but whatever you are comfortable honestly giving. Thank you and have a great day.